Today on the Big 3 in 30, the Steelers look at top options in the NFL draft.
We're going to go through the entire list.
The Vikings need to fit a hole at linebacker.
Somewhere in the top 100. The Vikings have 4 picks in the top 100.
And what does Jacksonville need to get out of next week's draft?
The 3 things the Jaguars need to come away with in the draft.
This is the Big 3 in 30 NFL, the 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The Big 3 in 30 NFL starts now. Thank you for making the Big 3 in 30 your first listen of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. The Steelers are in the final stretch before the draft, and their top 30 visits offers some real clues about how Pittsburgh could approach the first round. Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers sorts through some of the biggest names.
We're going to go through the entire list, and I'm going to rank them for you to show where this list kind of focuses certain attentions and how we can read this. Because remember, this is a new coaching staff. So this could be a new strategy for how the Steelers use their pre-draft visits. Now, a reminder, the rules of how this works, and we'll also get to this a little bit in the second segment because one of you asked a really good question on the strategies of using top 30 visitors. But the Steelers and every NFL team gets up to a maximum of 30 pre-draft visitors they can invite to their facility to interview them, get them more personal time with them, and get a closer look at some of the NFL draft prospects that are out there. You can also bring in local visitors, people that are from your the city that you work in, or played their college ball there. So for the Steelers, if you played high school football in or around Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania, or if you played football at Pitt, you were in that list there as far as being a local prospect. With that, there were 3 local prospects brought in and 30 top visits, or for 30 pre-draft visitors brought in. And so what I went ahead and did is I ranked these guys as far as where they were. Now I'm going to get the bottom of the list out of the way until we get to the top of the list, because to me, that's the big thing that you want to kind of see here is you want to be able to see the top people and why they are up there. But bottom of the list, there's a lot of guys. They did take a look at a lot of day 3 guys that I'm just like kind of curious the focus here when they have so many day 2 picks. But we'll get into some of the different strategies. There was guys like Khalil Dinkins, Will Kakmarek, 2 tight ends that are definitely going to be going with day 3, maybe even undrafted free agents. Jaden Duggar, a local linebacker, 6'5" though, and could be a freakish talent to have around. Travis Burke, an offensive tackle, who's definitely going to go late day 3. Jacoby Thomas, a safety out of Miami, who does have some decent ball skills. James Tasha Jr., another defensive lineman. Jack Kelly, linebacker to BYU. Harold Perkins, who a linebacker for LSU, who ran a really good 40-yard dash time, but still has a lot to go. Day 3 prospect. Kendrick Law, another day 3 wide receiver. Jeff Caldwell, a really big and really fast day 3 wide receiver. Taylor Green, the quarterback out of Arkansas. Just tall guy, really fast, around a 4.37, could be an interesting prospect there. Carson Beck, the Miami quarterback. Drew Aller, the Penn State quarterback. Cole Payton, the North Dakota State quarterback, all there. I kind of line up after that line there, and then fit it, and then rounding out guys as we start to get closer to that top 10 I was talking about. Other guys the Steelers brought in: tight end Marlon Klein out of Michigan. I thought he was one of the better tight ends that they looked at. He's more of a receiving tight end. Ephesians Prysock, tall cornerback out of Washington. Bo Stevens, the guard out of Iowa, who we talked a bit about on yesterday's show with Nick Farabaugh. Good player there. Really good 4th-round guard option, in my opinion, if they don't get a guard early. Takario Davis, the other Washington cornerbacks, I think a little bit better than Prysock. Markel Bell, a big, freakishly sized offensive tackle out of Miami. And then we get to Malik Muhammad, the cornerback out of Texas. A solid cornerback who can float between the slot and outside. And then we get to Darrell Jackson Jr., the defensive tackle out of Florida State. Big presence who I really liked at the Senior Bowl, and I think could be a decent late day 2 option. Kyle Lewis, the Pitt linebacker, again, a local visit there. Skylar Bell, the Connecticut wide receiver. And that's where you have, like, right on the fringe of where my top 10 guys are. Now, my top 10 guys All of these players that we're about to list here, these are either second or first round players, and the bottom half of here are all second round. So the next five that I read off are second round guys, and then the first round guys will come after that. But let's get to the bottom of my top 10 of the Steelers pre-draft visitors. Treydon Stukes is in there at 10. Certainly a really good playmaker. He's a guy that if the Steelers really wanted a free safety and who was, flexible and had good ball skills, he could fit in that role. He could also be a little bit flexible because he played slot quite a bit. But my number 9 is the guard out of Georgia Tech, Keelan Rutledge. You've heard me talk a lot about him on this show. He's a mauler. He's physical. I think he'd fit right in at left guard right away. And if they pass on Ioane or any of the other top guards, Rutledge would be a really good second or third round option. Jeremy Bernard, who the Steelers brought in this week or recently for a pre-draft visit, the shifty wide receiver out of Alabama, really good at getting out of his stance. Could improve, the later parts of his route running and could be a bit faster, but still a good day 2 wide receiver. Linebacker Jacob Rodriguez out of Texas Tech, one of the better linebackers, and could be an option to be a future green dot, as he was a really good leader for the Red Raiders. Jacob Rodriguez liked him there, and then rounding out at the 6th ranked spot of the Steelers pre-draft visits, Chris Johnson, the cornerback out of San Diego State, who I will say has grown on me the more that I've looked at him. He had a rough Senior Bowl week, but I looked more at his tape and I've seen him conduct himself and I've seen how he talks in interviews. I kind of like his fit, and he could be an interesting fit for the Steelers in the second round. But these are pretty much the second round guys. You could also throw Skylar Bell, the UConn wide receiver, maybe Kyle Lewis into this conversation, but I think those guys are more later second round guys who could float to the third round. But this is your second round sort of grouping here. The Steelers went in. This next group, though, this was the first round group. This was the group that I thought, excuse me, this is the group that I thought really tipped the hand maybe of where the Steelers could be going. That top 5 in this group, number 5 is Denzel Boston, the Washington wide receiver. He was one of the earlier Steelers reported Steelers pre-draft visits. He was kind of right away. Seemed like there was some excitement there. And early on, he was our 4th best receiver. He's now dropped to, I think, he's like, my 6th receiver now? Yeah, he's my 6th receiver behind Casey Concepcion. By the way, I didn't bring in Casey Concepcion. We'll get to that in a bit. But then after Denzel Boston, number 4 is Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, the safety out of Toledo. Big, good hitter. Always finds the football. Really good prospect there. I think it's good that they're looking at safeties because they need to find some good safeties very soon to add in the draft. And then my number 3 ranked prospect, Spencer Fano, the tackle out of Utah. A lot of people project Fano could be a guard at the NFL level. And then after Fano, at number 2, is the best guard in this draft class, is Venga Ioane, or Olaiva Ioane. Just pure dominance at the guard position, strong player, and would be a heck of a get. But my number 1 guy the Steelers brought in for a pre-draft visit is none other than, him, I've been talking about a lot on this show, Makai Lemon out of USC. My money, the best fit wide receiver the Steelers could ask for. If he falls within a trade-upable range, he's a guy that they should be looking at. Now, looking at these rankings here, the question that you have to ask yourself is, did the Steelers tip their hand? Because something the Steelers do or have done in the past is oftentimes their first round pick is one of these pre-draft visitors. And what helps even narrow it down is where they a pre-draft visitor and a combine invite, and did the top brass go to their pro day? Well, top brass didn't go to a whole bunch of pro days, so we got to scratch that one out. And so then it takes now forces you to take a look at who kind of fits the bill of what the Steelers could be doing in the first round here. And you look at the positions here: safety, wide receiver, guard. Those are 3 of the top positions we've been looking at here in this draft class. And I want to talk more about who the Steelers didn't bring in, but why it might not matter as much that they didn't bring some guys in, because there's certainly some names here that I know some Steelers fans, they would love to see some other names that didn't pop up on here, but it doesn't mean the Steelers aren't looking at those guys in the first round.
If you've ever opened your bank account and thought, where did all my money go? You're not alone. Keeping track of subscriptions, spending, and bills can get overwhelming fast. That's where Rocket Money comes in, helping you take control of all your finances in one place. How does Rocket Money help you keep track of those finances? It tracks all your subscriptions in one spot and can help cancel the ones you don't need with just a few taps. It can automatically categorize your spending so you can actually see where your money is going. It just makes everything feel more organized and gives you a clearer picture of your finances day to day. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/locked-on. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. Welcome back to the Big 3 and 30 NFL. The Vikings cannot come out of this draft without linebacker help, at least according to Locked On Vikings host Luke Braun, especially in a Brian Flores defense that asks so much from that position. Here's Luke with more on Locked On Vikings.
I would like to make a pitch for the Vikings to take a linebacker, not necessarily in the first round or anything like that, though there is an idea I like, but somewhere in the top 100. The Vikings have 4 picks in the top 100 right now. Number 18, number 49, 82, and 97. 97 is the compensatory third, plus their first, second, and third. So while a lot of that capital can be packaged up, moved around, traded up, traded down, whatever, somewhere in all of that chaos, I need him to take a linebacker. And there are a few reasons. For one, there's some linebackers that I just really like in this class. I just think that this is a class that's going to put some good guys into the league, and I want the Vikings to get their piece of that. That's just my opinion on the class so far as I have gotten into it. There's obviously Sonny Styles, who will be out of reach, and some other names that I will get into in a little bit more depth. Today, I'm going to talk most about Anthony Hill Jr. He's a linebacker out of Texas, who I'm actually not as big of a fan of for the Vikings specifically, but he's a guy I've done a lot of work on, and he is the example that I'm going to use to describe some stuff that I'll describe later in the show, namely how the Vikings use linebackers, what to look for when you're trying to identify a linebacker fit, and then later in the show who actually fits that bill. But first, I feel like I'm probably going to need to justify myself a little bit because linebacker is not the position that you typically hear about with the Vikings. It's safety, it's center, it's defensive tackle, it's cornerback, and it's these positions where the Vikings are straight up missing starters or looking to promote backups that haven't really otherwise earned that kind of promotion. And sure, that's absolutely fair. And if you want to, put linebacker somewhere, it's not going number one on the list of major needs, but I really want it to be in the plan somewhere that they get their hands on one of these guys. Because here's the deal. I'll reiterate some of the points that I made when I did the exercise at the end of last week about why they would have to take any position. You can make this argument for all of them. And for linebacker, it has a lot to do with contract length and the commitment that they've made. Both Blake Cashman and Ivan Pace Jr. are in contract years. Ivan Pace is on a tender year, but you can kind of think of it the same way. They'll both be free agents at the end of this year as it stands right now. So extending Blake Cashman could be something that's in the cards if the Vikings like it, but Blake Cashman's also had injury issues throughout his career. I don't know if he ever makes it through a full 17 with how much is going to be left of his career. And if the Vikings had somebody young waiting in the wings that could take over next year, that could be a prescient way to go about things. I don't know if they're going to keep Ivan Pace at all. They did the tender because it's cheap, and he's probably depth this year, maybe. I mean, he kind of lost his job pretty straight up to Eric Wilson last year, who's now the one who's gotten the extension, but he's in his 30s. So this position, while I think that trio of backers is totally fine. Add 1 5th rounder, whatever, as the depth, and that's your group of 4. I'd be pretty happy with that as a group this year. It is a group that is going to fracture a lot soon, like now. Like after this year, you're going to have one 32-year-old on the roster, and that's that, with 2 years left on his deal. And honest to God, that is a contract where it doesn't look like he's going to see the third year of it. So, or it's at least structured to make that a very tantalizing option if he's not still playing out of his skull. So taking a linebacker in general in this draft, adding young talent to that is something that I feel is a priority. Here's the other thing. as things have gone on the last few years, Brian Flores feels less and less like somebody with one foot out the door. When he first came to Minnesota in 2023, the grand overarching prevailing wisdom was that Brian Flores would be a one-year wonder, that he got his raw deal in Miami and look at all the turmoil there. And, he's going to take 1 year off and be a DC somewhere. That happened to be Minnesota. And then he's going to go get his second stint as a head coach because he was still pretty well regarded for the most part as a head coach. But that was all wisdom that was brought about without really understanding the scope and I guess we'll go with controversial nature of his lawsuit and the impact that would have on his career, whether you think it should or not. That's only gotten more true as what we've seen in the last 2 years is a sudden explosion of discussion about how things went for Brian Flores in Miami, how his relationship with Tua was, how his relationship was with other players. Quotes will resurface, new stories, new anecdotes will come out. And it always happens around January. Maybe I'm a little too conspiracy minded for my own good, but it does feel like it's always in some suspicious timing. And I don't think that that's going to stop happening. I think there is a kind of Steve Spagnuolo-esque trajectory sometimes with these defensive guys that get their one shot at being a head coach and then it doesn't go well. And then they go back to the ranks of being the defensive guy. I mean, it's not unheard of for a defensive guy to get a second stint like Robert Saleh, but it is rarer, to be sure, for somebody to get a second stint as a defensive guy. And that, coupled with not only the kind of social politics between owners of, hey, he's suing my buddy, let me hire him. Like, that's obviously going to be something difficult. But also the sort of reputation it gives him as this sort of unhappy camper, right? This rebellious guy. Do we really want that in an organization or whatever? Is this thing that seems to really hold him back. He got like 3 interviews. He got like 3 interview requests. He only did 2 interviews in this entire cycle. There were 10 head coach openings and 8 of them said no. And at this point, over the last 3 years of head coaching cycles, I haven't counted because I'm just doing this off the dome, but I would venture to guess more than half the teams in the league have had a head coach opening and not brought him in for an interview. So I would think that Brian Flores' next head coaching destination, if we were to put odds on it, I would think the favorite would be Minnesota. If things go sour with Kevin O'Connell and the offense continues to struggle and the defense continues to be good, that's the trajectory that it could be there. So to bring that back to linebacker, finding a Flores fit at linebacker, finding somebody that's good for this specific scheme, I'm getting a little less scared of the idea of bringing in somebody that's like meant for this. Because at this point, the Vikings defense is like made out of guys that are meant for this, out of Dallas Turners and Van Ginkels and Eric Wilsons and Jalen Redmonds and guys that have had way more success here than they had anywhere else, or like in Dallas Turner's case, as a draft pick, but as somebody who is tailor-made for the kinds of assignments that Flores wants to give, which is why I'm going to talk about that later in the show. And then the last kind of point that I'm going to make here about like positional value, which is kind of the point about this whole draft, at least for the Vikings, the positions we're talking about are the ones that are typically seen as like, hey, don't draft that thing high. And I would say that this draft, like, there is a safety that might go in the top 10. There is a linebacker that might go in the top 10. That's like an unheard of thing to have like a Sonny Styles figure. There are there's a Kenyon Sadiq, there's a high tier tight end, and you don't really want to do that. There's a guard that's going to go maybe in the top 15. That's not typical. There's all of these positions that are typically at the lower end of like the positional value spectrum that are going to go high just because that's the way this class is built, that those classes are just a little bit more, or, that the top end of those classes is beating out the top end receivers and the top end edge rushers, with the exception of Arvell Reese and David Bailey. And there isn't this big run of quarterbacks this year that you're going to have to get through. There's kind of the one guy at the top, and then it's like Ty Simpson, maybe a second rounder. So looking at the logic of all of that, it pushes down linebackers with the exception of Sonny Styles. And if you see a lot of those, like if you look at the database of like mock drafts and whatever other data that we have to try to predict the order of the draft, the Vikings will have their pick of the litter at 18 if they want to take a linebacker. I think CJ Allen would be the only guy at 18 that you would even really remotely think about. And I think most people would call that a reach. And so you get this opportunity for that to be the thing you do if you trade down. If you want to say picking at 18 is great, but we need more young depth than that, we're going to trade back, we're going to acquire future capital, we're going to do whatever. If you can find that trade partner, well, you're still picking somewhere, and maybe you've traded back away from the guys that we've been daydreaming about, like Jermod McCoy or Avion Terrell or Mansour Delane, or, the Dylan Thieneman thing. Okay, he goes, we traded past him. But you can still find your way into a stud.
The NFL Draft is here, where preparation meets opportunity and every decision matters. It's all about getting ready when your moment comes. And that same mindset applies off the field too. That's where Rougiette comes in. Rougiette offers treatments designed to help you feel ready and confident when it matters most. Their top option, Rougiette Ready, is a mint that dissolves under your tongue with clinically proven ingredients. They also offer Go Long, designed to help with both performance and control. It's about showing up at your best whenever your moment is. Head to Rougiette.com/LockedOnNFL and get 15% off your ED treatment. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Rougiette, performance medicine for men. Welcome back to the Big 3 and 30 NFL. The Commanders could be in the market for a running back at several points in this draft, and the board gets interesting when you get past that first round. David Harrison from Locked On Commanders tells us what DC could be thinking.
The three things the Jaguars need to come away with in the draft. It's not people. Obviously, people are going to be the reason that they come away with these things, or the reason why they don't come away with these things. But these are characteristics, team characteristics that they hope to fix in the NFL draft. Things that the Jaguars want to be, that only players, obviously, in the draft can help them be those things, because free agency, for the most part, is gone the first phase. Maybe if they come out of the draft and they don't have some things, they can go into the veteran market, and that's what we'll examine in segment number 3. However, the first thing I mentioned was they need to be more physical, and they did a good job of that last year. But I would not necessarily call the Jaguars offensively physically where they want to be as a team. They won all of those games, but I can tell you what, they want to be more physical. They want to be more dominant. They want to be one of the more physical and dominating teams in the league when they break that huddle. We heard that from Liam Coleman. He got the job. I know how Tony Baselli is yoked. Most offensive linemen are, especially great offensive linemen that were able to be really, really dominant. I know he wants to get back to that. We had conversations before last year even started, before he went from radio to a position in the front office. And just in conversations, it's obvious that that's something that he believes in from a football perspective. And a lot of people do. But the reality is, wins and being able to play well and call good plays, all of those things can sometimes trick you, especially when you win all of those games, and you have to make a real hard assessment of who you are and what you are. And you know that you're not as physical as you want to be. You know you're not, right? Well, you have to go and fix that. And the only way you fix it is through acquiring players, strength and conditioning program. By the way, the training staff was voted the league's best. Congratulations to them. for that. Now we got to put that stuff to use, right? And be even better. And it's not something that you go and try to be. That's what people call popcorn muscles. You don't just go and try to, like, when I remember when they needed speed at receivers, like every week they were bringing some dude in here that when he was at the combine, he ran a 4.3 or 4.4. You don't necessarily have to directly attack stuff like that, because if he's not a good football player, he's just running fast for no reason, right? When you improve your overall speed or you improve your overall physicality, it just becomes who and what you are across the board. It's not, well, you got one guy for this and you got one guy for that. We ain't a fast team, but we need more speed, so we're just going to go get a dude that runs fast. It has to be who you are when you're physical. You have to play that way. You have to think that way. You have to be yoked that way. So therefore, the way that you get that is player procurement and being able to instill and drive those things into people's heads through the way that you play and what you accept. You hear them always talk about violence and running the football, and everybody has to block. Those things tell you right there that physicality is at the forefront with all of the play design and all of this other stuff we talk about with schematics and where people are going to line up and alignment. Alignment is the biggest thing that has people in a headlock when they discuss football. When you're discussing real football, there's two things: alignment and fantasy football that drive, and sometimes stats that drive me absolutely crazy. Like, those things all matter as reference points, but alignment is not scheme. And I think people get that confused. You can have a 3-4 and a 4-3. They got the exact same scheme, but they just lined up differently. And it took me a long time when somebody finally taught me that. It was like the things I learned today. It was like a few years back when I really, really learned the difference. Believe it or not, it was from Coach Meyer. Someone was asking him about scheme, and then they mentioned 3-4, 4-3. He said, "What do you mean, alignment?" And it dawned on me. I always knew that there was a difference, but it really dawned on me that coaches hear you say stuff like that, and it's like you don't really know what you're talking about, right? So what they need to do is just be absolutely more physical on offense in particular. They're physical on defense because they're one of the best teams in the league to stop the run. And that leads to number two. Number two is they need to be better at two things that work hand in hand together. That is pressure and coverage. Coverage was hurt last year, obviously, because they played a lot of the season without Eric Murray. They played a whole bunch more of the season without both Jordan Lewis and Travis Hunter. So coverage on the back end combined with more pressure on the front end. And most of us believe Trayvon being healthy for a full year, Josh still being consistent, Eric Armstead, I know people think he's going to be off the team in June, and he just might, but right now he's not. So I think they love him. They like him enough that he's still here. At some point, they have to figure out how to get more pressure up the middle. I do believe that those things work hand in hand. The pressure as well as the ability to cover on the back end, because you get more pressure, but if they're not more sticky than they were last year, you're going to still have some of the same problems. Maybe not in the games where they're better than the other team, but in a game against really, really good teams where regardless of how good you are up front, if they're good too, like for instance, one of the teams that's traditionally has a good offensive line, like Philadelphia. If you go and play Philadelphia and you ain't going to make a living sacking the quarterback, it's going to be a stalemate. Like, they won't dominate you, but you'll get enough pressure to knock Jalen Hurts off his square a little bit. But if it's not enough to dominate, if you don't fix the back end where the pressure and the coverage kind of meet at an intersection, then it doesn't matter. So they need to improve both of those. I included them together because they are one and the same in the passing game. The other part of it is the last part. I said be more physical, come away with being better in coverage, and come away with better pressure as a combination. The last thing is they need to be more capable of explosive plays. Now, I know folks believe that a healthy Brian Thomas Jr. with his speed and size helps that. That is true. I know that folks believe that still spotting Travis Hunter on offense and putting him in certain situations, which they are going to do still, even though he's going to primarily play corner most of the time. Travis will still play offense. That has been made perfectly clear over the last couple of days with Travis quoting people like, who told you that? Like, I ain't playing. There's some people that took the fact that he's going to be starting at corner and primarily at corner as they gave up on him at wide receiver. And that's just absolutely not true. But they need more explosives. They got some big time plays in the return game last year, thanks to Parker Washington. They got a few explosive plays. Some of them came in bunches, but they need more of them. They need to be able to score quicker. They need to be able to get the ball downfield. They need to be able to have some bigger runs. So you say, well, they get rid of Travis Achan, who was their big run guy. I think Bashal Tootin can do that. Bashal Tootin ran better inside, according to Liam Cohen, that he showed on tape in college. So everybody thought he was an outside runner who fumbled all the time. And then he turns out to be a dude who, yeah, he had 1 or 2 fumbles, but for the most part was protecting the football and was the jump cut king. Okay. Chris Rodriguez will help them with that. And the reason why I say that is because most run plays are designed, if everybody blocks everybody, it's going to be you and one other person. Chris Rodriguez is one of the best at getting yards after contact. That's where big plays come. Big plays come with yards after contact when there's nobody there. It's you and one guy, and you juke him, and then you get it going. So what that also does is when you start breaking those tackles, it starts making the other guys kind of come out of their area to help out wherever you are. And they realize they got to get there quicker. And here comes the ups to daisy. This is the misdirection. Here comes the wheel routes. Here comes the bubble screens. Here comes the slants where somebody misses a tackle. So big plays doesn't necessarily mean the ball has to be in the air the whole time, but big plays come from the fact that you make people miss. Travis Hunter did it last year before he got injured. He did it against Houston. He did it against Carolina. He did it against Kansas City. They need more of that. Turning a 5-yard play into a 15-yard play and moving the sticks is a big play because it leads to other things.
That's all for today's Big 3 in 30 NFL. If you follow basketball or college sports, the Big 3 in 30 has shows for the biggest news in the NBA and on campus going up every week just like this one. Just search the Big 3 in 30 NBA or the Big 3 in 30 college wherever you're listening or watching now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 3 in 30 NFL.